Given we have the G20 coming up in November, and the big question will be how to sustainably increase agricultural production to feed the projected 9 billion in 2050, how do we convince the big decision makers at the table that investing in smallholder farmers is the answer?
Actually, what we found out in 1976 was that smallholders were more productive than large farmers. On a per hectare basis, small farms produce more than a large farm would. So that was a fairly strong finding that came out of the literature at that time. I think, the lessons that smallholders drive agriculture productivity growth, and that smallholders have been responsible for the Green Revolution success is very clear. All we have to do is look at Asia and what happened in Asia. The Green Revolution in Asia was driven by small farmers. China, India, Philippines, Indonesia, Thailand, everywhere. It was smallholders that did it. Somehow that message seems to have been lost in the broader global community. But it's slowly coming back. And the fact that G20 has China and India as members provides an opportunity for bringing this message back. Because the leaders from these countries can speak from their own experience. The Chinese can talk about how the Green Revolution in China took place on one moon of land, which is 1/15 of a hectare. And the Indians can talk about how the Green Revolution in Punjab was of farms which had an average size of less than a hectare. So that's going to be a very powerful message coming from the leaders of the countries that have actually been through the Green Revolution. But we're also in a situation today where there is a lot more interest in agriculture than there was even just a few years ago. The continued persistence of high prices, the continued volatility in prices have created a sense of urgency that the G20, I think, will take quite seriously as we look ahead. And we'll be looking at how do you improve productivity. And the areas where productivity growth needs to take place are in countries today which are still in much more traditional production systems, low productivity conditions, low income economies. And in these areas, the poor are in rural areas. The poor depend on agriculture, and the poor depend on ways in which productivity growth can improve their lives and help them grow out of poverty. And I think the more the G20 can focus on investments in technology, infrastructure, and policies that help the poor benefit from productivity growth, the better it's going to be.
The research projects show that we have an impact on smallholder farmers.
Mm-hmm.
The crops that we research quite naturally are linked to smallholder farmers because
Right.
they're subsistence crops like sorghum and millet. Our big challenge is getting research from the lab to the farmer, into the hands of the farmer. Can you advise on ways that we could improve the ways that research goes from the lab to the farmer?
I think getting research from the lab to farmers is a continuing and persistent challenge that all of us have been tackling for a long time. Unfortunately, there are not that many great examples to say, here's a good model, follow this. It's very context specific. But I think there's some basic principles here. I think one principle is research should be reflecting needs of farmers. And so I think there's a really solid need for looking at what are the current constraints to smallholders for increasing their productivity, and what can we do in the research system to change that. And quite often, when the research system comes up with solutions that may not be applicable in particular farming systems, blaming farmers for not adopting the technologies may not be the right place to put the blame. So first start with where the problem is, what needs to be solved, and then target your research accordingly. Second, I think it's really important to build local capacity with local organizations, local research institutions that can help adapt international research to local conditions. And then capacity of the local extension services to be able to transfer this technologies through to farmers. I think we need to be investing a lot more in local capacity building than we are doing today. And that includes helping not just government groups, but also NGOs in the private sector to be part of this process. And that could help us a lot in moving technologies forward. I think there's a third area here, and it's more in terms of an opportunity, and that's the use of ICT today. It's amazing how rapidly cell phones are spreading across this country and across the world. Every village I go to, I'm just amazed by how few people don't have a cell phone. It's amazing. Even very poor families have cell phones. Now, is there a way in which we can use cell phones as a way of transmitting messages, as a way of getting information back from farmers? And that'll be a major thing for us to do. That'll be a great challenge.
That, in fact, there's Africa, the Farm Radio project in Africa, which is now starting to look at participatory farmer radio programs, where you get the farmers' feedback and the farmers actually involved in making the radio program. But that's already one step where it's not just a sort of one-way dialogue, it's really a two-way dialogue.
Have you heard of Digital Green?
No, never.
Digital Green does videos, participatory videos. I was in my Bhuvnagar district just 2 weeks ago and visited one of the Digital Green sites there, and I was just amazed at the way poor women farmers were actually designing the storyline, the whole scheme around which the story needs to be told, and they were themselves acting in the video, they were directing, they had the camera. It was just spectacular the way in which rural communities are now using video to show successful practices that they are adopting, and then promoting this to similar-minded farmers across the country.
And actually the BBC World Service Trust is known, very well known in India for their large AIDS and HIV campaign, their public health campaigns. And I spoke to the director recently to introduce the concept of extending this to agriculture. And they said that they were looking at mobiles, using ICT, as you just said. In fact, not just radio, but radio and mobiles, to do educational programs and getting messages across to farmers. So this would be quite an exciting piece to follow.
Absolutely.
Thank you very much for your time.
You're welcome.